Hello everybody and welcome back to another beer review. Unfortunately I have a little bit of bad news, and that is that there's not going to be a beer review, and the reason is because I'm starting to get sick and the whole nasal sign. Well, it's not going so hot, and so actually doing a beer review, which requires you to smell and taste things, that'd probably be pretty boring because I can't really do those things at the moment. But I still have a voice, and there were some pretty cool things that happened yesterday, so I have Plan B. Let's do Plan B today on Beer Lay. How about that? So yesterday I was in Brussels at the Cantillon brewery, which is a brewery that specializes in sour beers and specifically Lambics. Just the style and everything is really, really interesting. So I just kind of wanted to talk to you guys about that, and maybe you guys will learn something new. So yesterday at the Cantillon brewery, they had like their open house. It is the beginning of the brewing season, which actually only takes place between November and about April. I will get to the reason why that is in this video at a later point. However, they had their open house yesterday, and you could go and you can see the entire brewery in its entirety, as well as drink a lot of their different types of beers, which we also participated in. So we actually got there at 7 in the morning, and that's when they started brewing, and we saw the actual mash process, which you can see here. And this is none other than taking cereals, about 70% barley and about 30% wheat. The wort is then drawn off from the grains and then cooked with hops. Lambics, however, don't use fresh hops. They use really, really old hops, and the reason that they do that is because they want them really dry and crispy so that there's no bittering acids which affect the flavor of the beer in a bitter type of a way. However, they do use the hops, and the main reason that hops are actually used in the first place is to preserve the beer. So what is quite important to mention here, because Lambic beers, they kind of have their own type of strategy in using hops, which is very different as opposed to, like a pale ale, for example. After the wort is cooked, however, this is actually kind of where the main difference of Lambics comes into play as opposed to other more common types of beer styles, and that is through the cooling process and the addition of yeast. So when you have your wort is already cooked, it is very hot, and you need to cool it down. Otherwise, when you add the yeast won't be able to live. I mean, you can't live in 100-degree water either. Yeasts are living microorganisms, and they need to have a cooler temperature. Again, kind of glossing over a lot of things here. Most big breweries do this in a very quick process, pretty much flowing it through a radiator, which cools it down in like a matter of seconds. However, Lambics are special in the fact that after the boiling process, the wort is then laid out on this big copper bed, which is known as a cool ship, and the windows are opened up to allow fresh air from the outside to come in and cool down the beer. And this is the reason why they need to do this in the winter, because in the summer, it's just not cold enough. They just put it out there, and it would take a really long time to cool down, so they brew it in the winter. The byproduct of this cooling process is that wild yeast, which is in the air all around you, including you at home right now watching this video, is just floating and swimming and flying around in the air. And during the cooling process, which takes about a day, the wild yeast spores will actually land in the beer and begin to ferment the beer. So as you could kind of imagine, this sounds a little bit unhygienic, but just think blue cheese is essentially moldy milk, and you eat that all the time. Well, I don't, because I just think that's disgusting. Also, because depending on the day, there might be different spores of yeast in the air. Every single batch is different. You can have the exact same recipe, but because of the yeast, you're gonna get different beers. But actually, the stuff that lands in the beer is actually what makes Lambic beers some of the most complex and high character beers that you can actually have. And this entire process is really what makes these beers super, super, super interesting and super complex and diverse, and makes them really cool. So after the wort is chilled out on the cool ship for about a day, beer is stored in large wooden barrels. Now, typically these are barrels that are secondhand from winemakers, and the beer will stay in there and ferment for about 14 months. Again, this process is a very long process, complicated, and every single step of the way, although it sounds uncontrolled, is kind of what makes these beers very complex. A lot of people won't be able to taste these differences. However, experts and the people that brew these beers are. And so what happens a lot of the time is that Lambics are then blended together, which create juices and other different types of sour beers. And again, this blending process is also extremely complicated and is really kind of what makes these beers really interesting. Lambics, juices, sours, spontaneous fermented beers are an extremely deep topic that you can really dive into, but that is kind of just like the main points that I'm touching on there. So yeah, if you guys are ever in Brussels and want to check out the Cantillon brewery, go right ahead. If you guys really want to know a lot about gooses and lambic beers, my suggestion would be to go to a cruise ship bar up in Copenhagen, which I was at a couple weeks ago, and this is actually really nice interchange in that. The Copenhagen special is going to be coming hopefully in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. Again, sorry that there was no beer review today. I hope this was really interesting. If you guys want to know more about lambics, you can ask me down in the comments, and I can try and answer some of those questions for you. And as always, don't forget to call your representatives and tell them you support common sense, bipartisan gun control legislation. And until that's going to do it. I can't talk. And yeah.